everybody, what is going on, and welcome back to the channel. So today's video is going to be fun. We're finally going to be getting the new rear end in. That means the 10 bolt is going bye-bye finally. But let's run inside. There's a few things we have to do for the rear before I can get it installed. And then we're going to come out, get the car on jack stands, and start pulling that 10 bolt out. All right, guys, so here it is, the replacement for the 10 bolt. Now, as you can see, I decided on the Strange S60. I ordered this through Midwest Chassis, and I know initially was talking about going with the Hawks 8.8, but I kind of changed my mind last minute, primarily because of cost and strength. Now, an 8.8 is a strong-ass rear end, but being my car is a manual, and I do plan on putting, drag radials on it. I know an 8.8 would hold up, but I feel like in the back of my mind, I would always be thinking, should I have went with the stronger rear end? It's going to take a lot of abuse. And from what I've been hearing, these things are pretty much bulletproof. So I figured if I go with the S60, I could do it once and I shouldn't have to worry about it. A lot of guys are also suggesting going with the Ford 9-inch. There's really no reason why I chose this over the 9-inch. From what I thought the 9-inch was going to be more expensive. That's kind of why I was steering this direction. This just caught my eye and a lot of guys recommended it. So that's why I went with the S60 instead. But the options I got with mine are 373 gears, as you saw with my runs at the track. After I temporarily put the 410s in the 10 bolt, I was having the problem where I was going to have to shift to fifth gear once I hit the line. So I'm definitely glad I went with the 373. I also got a drive shaft here. It's a chromoly drive shaft, and it also comes with 35 spline axles and an S-track posi. Now, cost-wise, this cost me shipped to my door $3,600. That's with the drive shaft. The rear, I believe, was just under $3,000. The biggest thing was the shipping, and then I needed a drive shaft. If I went with the 8.8, that wasn't something I was going to have to get. So obviously it would have been cheaper. I think the 8.8, once it was built through Hawks, with shipping, it came out to just over $3,000, and that was without a drive shaft. So upgrading the rear, I was going to have to get a drive shaft down the line anyway. So pretty much between this and the Hawks, they're about the same price. So I mean, why not go for the stronger rear? Plus, I know it's going to be a little bit heavier, but once again, it comes back to having the manual transmission. I'd much rather have a stronger rear than have a slightly weaker one that was a little bit lighter. So before I can actually get this in the car, I do have to install the axles, and I am going to coat the thing with Pour 15. A couple of options I decided not to get was the powder coating. That was about $200 extra. I also got the standard cover. I figured the rear's a beast as it is. I don't think the cover is going to make much of a difference. Now, the reason the axles aren't installed was because, from my understanding, it wasn't going to come with these caliper brackets. And the way this rear holds together, obviously it doesn't use C-clips anymore. The seal and the bearing get pressed onto the axle after you slip the bracket on. So the bracket is what actually holds the axles in. The bearing sits in this groove here, and that sits at the hub, and then you press on the seal and the bearing, and that's what actually holds it on. So they weren't able to press the bearings on until they had these plates, and they told me if I was going to buy them from Strange, they were $100 a side. So I said, screw that, just send it to me with the axles out. I got the press. I'm just going to take the ones off my 10 bolts, and then I'll press the bearings on after, install them. No problem. I don't have to pop the middle section open because there's no C-clips. I could just fill it up and I'll be good to go after. But then the rear end came, and it came with these brackets anyway, even though I didn't pay for them. I don't know if they threw them in there by accident or they just come with the rear. But either way, if I knew that was the case, I could have just ordered it with the axles already in and the thing fully assembled. Also comes with studs and the T-bolts for actually securing the axles into the rear. And the other cool thing is they actually give you rear end links. So I don't know if these are any different from the stock ones. Maybe they're a little bit longer. I don't know. We'll see once we actually go to install the thing. The other cool thing is it comes with the holes for the low control arm brackets already in the rear, so I don't have to take my LCA relocation brackets off of my old rear because those are welded on. So right now I'm going to start by pulling these axles out. We're going to slide the brackets on, get the seals and bearings pressed on. Alright, so I just finished getting the axles installed. Pretty straightforward. The only thing that kind of gave me trouble is the locking collar, because this goes on really, really tight. This is what prevents the bearing from backing off the axle and the axle coming out. So when you're pressing this down, a lot of force is going on this. And initially I was using an old door hinge, piece of scrap metal across the top here, and I was using that to press the bearings on. But once it came to actually pressing that locking collar on, that thing was just bending. So I ended up actually just using one of the thick plates from a bearing splitter. But you can see the way this sits. Here is your caliper bracket, and this is what's actually going to hold the axle in. Then we have the grease seal here. Here's the actual bearing, and this is the locking collar. And then installed in the axle, inside of here, there's actually a seal. So when I tap the inner seal in, that's what keeps the differential fluid in. So here's the other side. You can see that's the inner seal. So the axle just slides in like that. And then our caliper bracket here, that sits like that. And we put the T-bolts in, nuts on this side, and that's what actually holds the axles in. Alright guys, so before I start doing anything else, I'm just going to go through this stuff real quick, just what I'm going to be doing right now, and then I figure I'll just time-lapse through everything. First thing is the drive shaft, that's coming out. So the 4 11mm bolts holding that in are going to come out, and then I'm just going to slip it out over the top like when I put it in last time. I already went and pinched off the brake hose going to the back calipers. So this is pinched off on the car side, and then it just disconnects from the axle over here. That's just going to keep any fluid from draining out, making a mess while I'm working on it. Then I'm going to go pull the panhard bar off. That's this one 19mm bolt here. There's the nut on the other side. Then I'm going to swing this out and just stick it up here to keep it out of the way. From there, I'm going to come in here and unbolt both sway bar links, and then the shock from the actual rear, as well as the lower control arm. Once those are out, you're going to want to have your jack under there because there's going to be nothing holding the rear up. So I'm going to put the jack under in the middle here, get the weight off the shocks, unbolt the shock control arm, then I'll be able to lower it down and unbolt the 2 torque arm bolts because these are really long bolts that go all the way through the axle. So once the nuts are off, you're going to want the rear to be hanging down a good amount so you can actually slide the bolts out through the top. Once the axle is actually far down enough, you can just come in here and pull the springs out. There's not going to be a load on them. The only other thing I'm going to have to do is remove all the brakes. So I'm going to pull the calipers off, the hoses, detach the parking brake cables, as well as remove the hard line and the clips holding the hard line onto the old rear, because I'm going to have to transfer this over to the strange rear because it doesn't have actual brake lines on it. And now that I'm under here, it looks like I'm going to have to do something with this exhaust, because you can see there, I've been hearing a clunking from the rear as well. You can see it's rubbing on the rear over here. When the suspension's all the way up, this is probably knocking against the axle. And the strange axle, obviously the tubes are bigger, so it's probably going to really be rubbing on there once I get that in. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to either get a hanger and pull this up, or most likely I'm going to have to pull the back of the pipe out of the Y pipe and shorten that piece and slide it in more, and then that's going to actually pull this whole pipe forward, and that should stop the rubbing. Bolts out, and once I got those weight checks out, I wanted to see if they were going to fit inside the spring perches, and just as I thought, they do not fit inside of this rear. I pulled the Dremel out, tried to take some material off, get rid of the port 15 just to see how much actually has to come off to get this to fit. And I mean, if you look here, there's a good amount that has to come off. I mean, once this is centered, it's literally like half of the distance between the inside lip and the outside lip. So that's a lot of material to get this to fit. I do not have it in me to sit here right now and just grind away at this thing until it's going to slide in there. So I think what I'm going to do is one of two things. Either I'm going to put my Sportline rear springs back in and not use the weight jacks, at least for now, or actually run the weight jack without this collar and just run the spring straight onto the rear. Now, obviously that's going to drop the car more, but from my understanding, being these axle tubes are a lot thicker than the 10 bolt, that these actually sit a little bit higher, obviously, because you know, with the smaller rear, even if this is at the top of the 10 bolt axle, it's going to sit a little lower. For now, I'm going to just get the thing installed. I'm going to put the eye-box in first and see where it sits. If the height is good, I'm just going to leave it with the eye-box springs in the rear. If it's sitting ridiculously high, then I'll go and pop the ground control springs in without the collars and see where it sits. But as of right now, I don't really plan on, you know, machining this out to get this to fit. So let's go ahead, get this thing in the car, and then we'll pop the springs in and we'll see where it sits. So the rear's all lined up. I have my new drive shaft here ready to go in. I decided I'm not going to put it in just yet. I was actually able to just slide the rear under there, and I was actually able to get both the torque arm bolts lined up in there. And I just put the nuts on the bottom. So the rear is pretty much positioned. Now when I get a jack under the back and lift it up, I don't have to worry about a tip and fold or anything. So next step, I'm going to get the jack under there, lift it up, get the control arms hooked up, and tighten down the torque arm bolts. Then I'm going to come in, slide the drive shaft in, get that hooked up. Then we'll pop our springs in, lift it up, hook up the rest of the stuff, brakes, we got to slide the axles in. Then we'll be ready to fill it up, and hopefully we'll have time to take it for a test drive. Before we get back to installing the axle, one thing I wanted to address, that you actually need a shorter drive shaft for the Strain. You can see side by side with the 4th gen, the Strange one is maybe, you know, 1.5 inches, 2 inches shorter. And that makes sense because you look under here, you can see the actual diff comes out a lot farther than the 10 bolt. The snout on the 10 bolt here is relatively short compared to the Strange, so that's why you need the shorter drive shaft. So the car's back on the ground, and the way it's sitting, I mean, I haven't moved it yet, but as far as the ride height in the back, it's pretty much right where I want it. I don't know if it's gonna go down anymore as I drive it. The only thing I'm really concerned with the ground clearance now, because it was kind of close how it was before, and I feel like now I'm definitely gonna be scraping a lot more on the exhaust. You can see that back piece by the flex pipe there hangs pretty low, as well as the collector on the passenger side. I'm probably gonna go around the block, test drive it, see where it's gonna settle, and then I'll go from there. But I'm gonna go take it out now. We'll go for a little ride, come back, and we'll see how it's looking. The maiden voyage with the S60. So far, right when I pulled out of the driveway, I noticed that I heard a scrape from the exhaust in the back. first thing I noticed, it's completely quiet. Like before, I mean, all the thing used to do was whine and whine and whine. Always, even before, you know, the rear started having problems. It was completely stopped before I even touched it. It was always just a noisy rear end. But now with this one, I mean, it's just completely quiet. I mean, I let off the gas. There's no more boop, 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 boop. Like there's nothing, it's just quiet. And that alone, I mean, makes it worth it 110% for me. Because that rear end was annoying as hell. Right now I'm just driving around a parking lot. You know, no weird noises. I don't hear anything rubbing. Basically full lock almost there. I mean, there's like a braking procedure that Strange wants you to do. I think for like the first 500 miles before you really get on it. I was just glancing at it online, and it's just like a bunch of stuff like drive the car for a half hour at 40 miles an hour, let it cool for an hour, drive it again for another half hour at 40 miles an hour, like stupid stuff like that. So I'm going to try to, you know, stick to that as best as I can, you know, for the first few hundred miles. But after that, yeah, we're going to be going back to the track and seeing what this thing could do. All right, so here we are after driving a couple of miles with the same weight jacks in the rear without the adjustment collar. And I mean, the stance, like where it's sitting, it's absolutely perfect. Like this is exactly where I want it, where it's perfectly level across, you know, same amount of wheel gap in the front and the back. So as long as the rubbing doesn't turn out to be like a huge issue with driving every day, you know, driveways, hitting dips on the highway, you know, I don't want like sparks flying, stuff like that. I think I'm gonna run it this way. The only thing I'm noticing, it looks like the driver's rear wheel, I mean the passenger side rear wheel is sitting a tiny bit lower than the driver's side. I noticed that when I was in the driveway too. I mean, from the back it looks relatively straight, but I mean, that's the only thing I'm really noticing. It looks like there's enough space with the bump stop, so I don't think I'm gonna have to really run into problems with that. There's a good few inches between the bump stop and the axle. My fender is also rolled, just the top piece here. I had it rolled before I painted it, so I'm really not gonna have to worry about the tire hitting up here. That's not really a concern. But I'm gonna run this for now. By next video, we'll know for sure whether or not I'm putting the iBox Pros back in the back, leaving it this way, or finding a way to get the adjustment collars back in to work with the S60 rear. But for now, I'm just gonna run like this and we'll see where it goes from there. So there it is, the new rear is installed in the car. I am extremely happy with it. Sure, I just drove it a couple of miles, but so far it is completely quiet. Everything went together very, very well. I mean, as far as fitment goes, the stock sway bar worked. They gave you the links. They gave you all the hardware, stuff like that. Drive shaft fit perfectly. So all in all, I mean, for about, with bleeding the brakes and everything, it probably took me 4.5, 5 hours from pulling the 10 bolt and getting this up and running. So yeah, definitely don't be afraid to tackle it yourself. If you're looking to do like a 4th gen rear swap like I did, just keep in mind, if you are running a stock rear right now and you do go to a 4th gen rear, your wheels are going to stick out about 2 inches wider on each side because the 4th gen rear is a little wider. Sure, if you get different wheels, then you're not going to have that problem. That's why I'm running the C5 wheels. You can see with the C5 wheels, the spacing is the same as 4th gen F-body spacing, so you're able to fit them. Otherwise, I would probably have to run, I think, a 2-inch spacer on the rear as well as the front. But I'll keep you guys posted. Look out for the next video because I do have drag radials coming in. I ordered a set of rims, drag radials. So very soon we'll be going back to the track to see what this thing is going to do. If you don't follow me on Instagram, link is going to be in the description as always. Always posting pictures of the car. Posted a picture when the rear went in. So if you want to get the inside scoop of videos coming out and what is going on next with the car, definitely go check that out. Hey guys, I wanted to give you a quick update before I close this video out. Pretty much last night I went on the highway, drove the car around. The rear is absolutely fine. You know, it's extremely quiet compared to before. I'm really not used to it. I mean, it's just silent now. Everything feels good. There's no weird noises. The only thing, by running the weight jacks without the adjustments and the ride height so low, it's bottoming out a lot. Like hitting dips on the highway, it's hitting the bump stops. Not only that, the exhaust is scraping a lot in and out of the driveway. I mean, it's scraping on things I never thought it could even scrape on before. So for now, I went and put the Pro Springs back in the rear. I'm gonna see if there's a way that I can modify the ground control adjustment collars to kind of maybe cut them and you know, close them up a little more to get them to slide into the rear, or just cut those pipes off altogether and put something smaller. So I'm probably gonna go ahead and tackle that for an upcoming video. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.